in Romans, we were just in Romans 5. What I don't have here is Romans 12:2, which I hope is familiar to you if you're a Christian. And be not conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God. And right before that, he says, I beseech you, brethren, by the mercies of God, that you present your bodies a living sacrifice, wholly acceptable unto God, which is your reasonable service. That sacrifice component is very, very important, because there comes a point in time when you are suffering where your worldview no longer works and your ego has exhausted all of its resources, and it is time to die to your current way of being that you know about. All right? And you get both a personal sense of death and a domicide sense of death, to where the world will no longer look the same to you after a transition that you undergo. So you basically die to a way of being. And that's what happens. And then after that, in Romans 13, after he says transform, and you could say that the rest of the book is kind of about not really how to transform, but what your priorities should be while you await transformation. Something like that. Owe no man anything but to what? Love one another. For he that loveth another hath fulfilled the law. For thou shalt not commit adultery, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not kill, bear false witness, thou shalt not covet. If there be any other commandment, it is briefly comprehended in this saying, namely, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. The summation of all the law, according to Paul here, is love your neighbor as yourself. Love worketh no ill to his neighbor, therefore love is the fulfilling of the law. Did you hear that? 1 Corinthians 12:31. But covet earnestly the best gifts, and yet I show unto you a more excellent way. And then he goes on, what is that more excellent way? It is the way of charity. 1 Corinthians 13 writes in a whole chapter called the love chapter. And that is the more excellent way. It's the way of charity. And now abideth faith, hope, charity, these three, but the greatest of these is charity. And why do our churches have a statement of faith, but they don't have a statement of charity, if charity is greater than faith? Have you ever thought about that? I think that's very interesting. Maybe our priorities are wrong, and I think they are. I remember as a fundamentalist Baptist, when people would start preaching on love and how people will know my disciples if you have love one for another, I started feeling kind of antsy in my pantsy, because everything we had done was all about winning at rivalry. It was about being right and being correct and proving that we were correct and being right at rivalry and being able to debate everything down to the nth degree. And where's your charity for people then? And I kind of knew it and had an inkling of it at the time, but couldn't admit it to myself, that I was engaging in a version of Christianity that was basically anti-charity. Colossians 3:14, and above all these things, put on charity, which is the bond of perfectness. Really, above all these things, put on charity, which is the bond of perfectness. Well, perfect, you want to be mature and wise? Charity is the key, okay? John 13:35, by this shall all men know that you are my disciples, if you have love one to another. I saw somebody on Facebook, and I can't remember if I can even remember this. It was an atheist complaining about Christians, and they said, we're not mad at you because your Christians. Were upset with you because you're not acting like your founder, something like that. It was a much more clever way of wording it, but that's the basic gist of it. 1 John 3:10-14, and this the children of God are manifest, and the children of the devil. Whosoever doth not righteousness is not of God, neither he who loveth not his brother. For this is the message that ye have heard from the beginning, that we should love one another. Not as Cain, who was of that wicked one, and slew his brother. And wherefore slew he him? Because his own works were evil, and his brother's righteous. Marvel not, my brethren, if the world hate you. We know that we have passed from death unto life, because we love the brethren. That's the indicator. He that loveth not his brother abideth in death. If a man say, I love God, and hateth his brother, he is a liar, for he that loveth not his brother whom he hath seen, how can he love God whom he hath not seen? And this commandment that we have from him, that he who loveth God, love his brother also. So that's pretty clear right there, that love is a huge component of genuine Christianity. And it used to kind of make me antsy in the pants when I would hear that, because I knew that my version of Christianity was totally focused on rivalry rather than love. Tim Ramsey says, "Thank you, brother. You've been a great encouragement to me in my growth and walk." All right, and I appreciate that comment. So thanks. It's good to get some positive feedback every now and then. So, Kevin, why are you taking all the time to read all this scripture? Because there are some people who, if I don't do it, they will say, "I hope we can remain biblical and not philosophical today." Is it biblical enough for you yet? Do you see all the passages of scripture we're using? That's what we're doing. We are being biblical. And that's why we are 22 minutes into the video and have not yet started covering the material, is because of people like you. Otherwise, I would presume that everybody just understood these passages and we could just get to the content. But because, we got to be biblical and not philosophical. There are passages, Proverbs 3:11 says, and we're talking about chastening, okay? And I've highlighted the word chastening here and in 1 Corinthians 11:32 and in Hebrews 12:5-13. And you could screenshot that and read that. I might not take the time to read it, but I want to give you another way. And then Galatians 3:23-25 is pretty important over here. "But before faith came, we were kept under the law, shut up under the faith which should afterward be revealed. Wherefore the law was our schoolmaster to bring us unto Christ, that we might be justified by faith. But after that faith has come, we are no longer under a schoolmaster." So some things kind of act as a container for first half of life wisdom. And then later on, you get the content of that wisdom. And, once the milk is drunk, you can throw the container away. You have to, this is a quote from Christopher Mastropietro, right? And it's kind of probably paraphrased because I typed it and the video did not have a transcript. He says, "You have to go through this period of suffering such that you exhaust yourself beyond the limits of what is tenable." Kevin, what is tenable? Tenable means to be able to be maintained or defended against attack or objection. Okay? And then also the word purchase is going to come up in a second. And the main definition of the word purchase isn't to buy something, but to hold a position on something for applying power advantageously or the advantage gained by such application. Okay? So when you see the word purchase, those are the definitions for the words tenable and purchase, which some people may not understand when they're used here, so we just showed the definitions for you. You have to go through this period of suffering as such that you exhaust yourself beyond the limits of what is tenable. You have to realize that what you have to offer is no longer defendable. "Somehow I'm coming up against the frame of the world that I held, and there's no purchase anymore." So you encounter a situation to where the framing of the world that you have no longer gains you anything. You can no longer get any traction with it. Breath is gone. Something is finished. I've reached the end point of myself beyond which there is just nothing. It's almost as if you have to get to that point personally or communally. It has something to do with reaching the end, listen closely, reaching the end of a period of suffering that exhausts whatever the worldview was that was doing the gripping, and now it can't grip anymore. And now it's like transform or die. It's almost like there are two choices, transform or die. And that's what, like I know people, I'm thinking of them right now, to where they have gone through some suffering, and that suffering should be demonstrating to them that it has exhausted the worldview that they are holding on to, and that worldview no longer has the capacity to apprehend or grip the world as it is now being presented to them. Wow, I'm messing up. The values that I advocate, I no longer have the skill to exact or act out. And therefore, what do you do now? That's what we're talking about here in this video. And now it's like transform or die. There are two choices. This doesn't happen until the resources of the ego have been exhausted. And that comes later in this video. It's a YouTube video called Into a New World with Christopher Mastropietro, where two Christians are talking about some of the concepts that we're dealing with in the world today in light of the meaning crisis and the Kairos and COVID and all that. So think about that. The resources of the ego have been exhausted. Think about how many resources James White's ego has and how he can keep making stuff up, keep cleverly adding more and more post hoc rationalizations to prevent himself from exhausting whatever worldview is doing the gripping. He prevents himself from coming to that edge. And so just as Jesus says it's like impossible for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven, in the same way, it's impossible, like the Franciscans use the word poverty for like he that is poor in spirit. It's not a reference to money. But the rich man, the person who has all kinds of resources in their ego, it's nearly impossible for them also to see the kingdom of heaven, to enter the kingdom of heaven. They'll never get there because they have so many resources in their worldview and in their ego to keep deceiving themselves that they're grasping something when they aren't. So it's better to be humble and poor in spirit than like this. But I thought these quotes were outstanding. And I actually got this link sent to me for this video by Nick just a couple days ago. And I found these absolutely captivating comments in here. And it gives me a visual of somebody going through some kind of suffering, and I can see their ego and I can see their paradigm or their worldview, whatever you want to call it. And they're suddenly waking up to the idea that what they've constructed their ego out of and the worldview that they're holding no longer have any capacity, no longer have any affordances for them in the new reality as it's currently revealing itself to them. Like they were trying to do one thing, they realized they couldn't do it, and now that worldview doesn't work anymore. What do you do now? You have to get to that point before you're ready to make a serious growth transition.